Mrs. Goodall.
Hello.
Daniel, so nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Good to you too.
Susanna, take a photo of this.
It's a bit crude.
No, seriously.
Mrs. Goodall, welcome to Chile.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this conversation with Chilevisión. You became world famous because of your work with the chimpanzees. What is the most important lesson that chimpanzees taught to you?
Well, when I'd been with the chimpanzees for nearly 2 years, I was told I had to go to university because my mentor, Louis Leakey, wanted me to be taken seriously. Now, I had never been to college, but I was doing a PhD. Imagine how I felt when I got there and I was told I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names, they should have had numbers, that was scientific, and I couldn't talk about them having personalities or minds or emotions because those were unique to humans. And I was told that I couldn't have empathy with them because to be a scientist you had to be objective, and if you were objective, then you couldn't be a good scientist. And I knew that was all complete rubbish because of the dog I had as a child who taught me that, you know, we're part of and not separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. And so the reason I say that is because when my then husband, Hugo van Leeuwenhoek, took photos showing that everything I was saying about the chimpanzees was true, then gradually science had to change its attitude and understand, you know, that we're not entirely separated by a gulf. And so that has led to a new understanding of so many animals and birds and so on.
Yeah. And you demonstrate, of course, that chimpanzees are individuals with emotions, with intelligence, that form bonds between them. Was this a surprise for you to discover these kind of things?
No. No, because, you know, I'd been interested in animals all my life, and I spent hours watching squirrels and birds in the garden. I had a couple of dogs, and so because I'd read about chimpanzees in captivity, and there was one group that was incredibly intelligent, so it wasn't a surprise.
And after learning that, what is the difference between great apes and human beings?
Well, I believe the most obvious difference is the explosive development of our intellect. So although chimpanzees and other animals like elephants and whales and right down to octopus are way more intelligent than we used to think, but I mean, they can't design a rocket that goes up to Mars. And I believe that this was in part developed in us because at some point in our evolution, we started using language with words so that we can talk about things about which aren't present. We can teach children about things they've never seen. And most important, we can bring people together to discuss problems and find solutions.
So it's this verbal language that makes a huge difference.
I mean. Yeah, I mean, animals communicate and sometimes very sophisticated, but they can't do what we've managed to do because we have words.
So we are apes that have words, maybe?
We're apes that have words.
Love, hate, empathy are not strictly human feelings. We know that. Are they widespread in all the animal kingdom, this kind of feelings, this kind of emotions?
Well, probably if we go down to things like jellyfish, and they are animals, probably they don't have emotions, but we know that octopus do.
Mm-hmm. And your research transforms scientific perception of the relations between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. How should we as humans in this planet interact with the rest of the animals that are living with us in this planet Earth?
We should show respect and compassion, and we must understand that so much of what we do is basically torture. And, you know, I just heard just last week the Japanese have started commercial whaling again, and that means they shoot a harpoon into the whale with a grenade that explodes inside the whale. So can you imagine the agony in this incredibly intelligent, long-lived creature which has sophisticated relationships. And it's horrible. And then in scientific research, medical research, there's still a lot of horrible cruelty to animals and many other things like sports hunting and so on.
And the food industry, what's your view about what food industry does to animals?
Appalling. Industrial animal farming. And when I see pictures of it with cows in small spaces, with pigs, female pigs sometimes confined in wire hoops when they have babies, and it's said to be, well, because they won't lie on them, but pigs don't lie on their babies any more than people do.
You talk about sports also. Many people will say, well, it's a tradition to have sports like bullfighting or this kind of things.
Well,
what do you think about it?
Spain has they've banned hunting. And as we know more about the animals, these traditions, I mean, you know, we don't hang people by the neck until they're dead. We used to. That was a tradition. There's many traditions that we've given up. And some traditions should change as we learn more about the beings that we're actually torturing.
And do you think that humankind is more aware now than it was in the past about the effects of this kind of tradition or practices in the animals?
Many, many more humans. And that's why I work so hard to spread the Jane Goodall Institute youth program, Roots and Shoots, around the world. Because young people, when they grow up and they come to understand these things, they're going to be, and already some of them are, the next decision makers. And they're going to be the next parents and teachers. So gradually this awareness, and it's not only our groups, but I know we're in 70 countries now.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later, of course.
Yeah.
But before that, at some point you decide to take a step like beyond science and become an activist. Why?
Because in 1986 I helped put together a conference. By that time there were six other groups of people, scientists, studying chimps in 6 different parts of Africa. And I'd always believed that chimpanzees have a kind of primitive culture, like they make tools, and we were anxious to know how different it was in different parts of Africa. But at the same time at the conference we had a session on conservation and on conditions in captive situations. And it was a total shock, to learn about things in medical research, but then also to learn about the fact that chimpanzee numbers were dropping right across everywhere they were being studied, and forests were being cut down. And so, you know, people say it must have been a tough decision, leaving Gombe to travel around. But it wasn't, it was just a change. Like I went to the conference as a scientist, expecting to spend the rest of my life where I love to be. But I left as an activist because I knew I had to try and do something, even though I had no idea what to do.
And many people believe that you have to choose between protect animals or develop the well-being of human communities that live near animals. Do you have a different approach about that?
I think I recognized when I was flying over the chimpanzee habitats in Africa, and I looked down at Gombe, where I've done this long-term research. And when I arrived in 1960, it was part of the great equatorial forest belt that stretched across Africa. By the late 1980s, I looked down with horror to see a little tiny island of forest that was Gombe National Park, and all around the hills were bare. And I realized there were more people than the land could support. They were too poor to buy food elsewhere. They were cutting down the forest simply in order to survive, to make more land to grow more food, or to make money from charcoal or timber. And so that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimps or forests or anything else. And that's when we started the community-led conservation. And I think we were certainly one of the first, if not the first, to actually go into the villages, not as a group of arrogant white people this is what we're going to do to make your lives better, which was typical at the time. But going in with a group of local people and asking them, what can we do? What can JGI do to help you to find an alternative way of living? And so, that turned into what we call Takari, and it's a very holistic program, restoring fertility to the overused land without pesticides and herbicides and things like that, and better education and health systems, those are the things they asked for, but then water management programs, and then scholarships to give girls a chance of secondary education, which back then they didn't have. Microcredit based on Muhammad Yunus's grooming bank, and he took me there and he introduced me to people who'd had the first tiny loans to start their own small, environmentally sustainable businesses. And so that's now in 5 other African countries, and it's totally changed the way these people are living. And we've introduced technology so that village volunteers are trained to monitor the health of their forest. So they have been trained to use cell phones or iTablets, and they chose themselves, okay, we'll monitor if we find an illegally cut tree, an illegal animal trap, but we'll also press a button if we see a chimpanzee or a pangolin, and so it's everybody's benefiting, and now they have become our partners in conservation.
And do you think this kind of partnership with the communities can be replicated like all around the world?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. As I say, it is in 5 other African countries where we work with chimps. And we've just published a book about the method, and that's now ready to spread so that other people, if they want to, can.
And you said that the key was not getting there like arrogant white men or white women saying, okay, that's what you need. Many times, like maybe the conversation efforts in the world commit that mistake.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've just been very arrogant, and still in many cases, indigenous people, we're beginning to hear their voices, but not enough.
Juan said, we haven't borrowed the future from our children, we have stolen it. What do you mean by this?
Well, what I mean is that we're looking at climate change, we're looking at loss of biodiversity, we're looking at poverty, we're looking at industrial farming, poisoning the land. And if we continue like this, then what's the future going to be? And, I was talking to the CEO of a big company the other day, and he said, Jane, for the last 8 years, I've really been trying to make my company more sustainable, more ethical, in the country where we source our products, in the supply chain, in our offices around the world, and our customers. And he said there were 3 reasons. 1, I saw the writing on the wall that we, using up natural resources in some places quicker than they can be restored. Secondly, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask questions. How was this made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? But he said what tipped the balance for me was my little girl of 10. And she came back from school one day. She said, Daddy, they tell me that what you're doing is harming the planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet. That reached the heart.
That's what makes the difference.
And this is my way of dealing with people that I meet, that I'm trying to convince that we need to take action. Not to point fingers and blame them and all that. No. Find out a little bit. Maybe there's one thing you share in common. Maybe you have grandchildren. Maybe you love dogs, something. And then listen to them, because maybe they've thought of something that you haven't. But then you've got to reach the heart, and the way to do that is telling stories.
Let's talk about roots and shoots. Why are you so focused in working with children?
Because these are the young people whose future right now we are and have been destroying. And a lot of young people back in the late 80s, I found that a lot of young people, high school, university, were even then losing hope and becoming depressed. And so if our young people become depressed and give up, we're doomed, because they're the ones inheriting the mess that we've made. And if they don't have hope that we can do something about it, if we get together and take action now. And so Roots and Shoots is about young people now in 70 countries, all ages, preschool through university. And it's not top-down. It's not us telling them what to do. It's them choosing 3 projects, because everything's interrelated. One to help people, one to help animals, or other animals I should say, because we're animals too, and one to help the environment. And so they are, by taking action, seeing that they can make a difference, and that gives them hope that together around the world it's making a big difference, even small changes to help the planet. When you get them cumulatively together, makes a big difference.
You're making an impact in children, and looking back when you were a child, who made an impact in your life, in your way of thinking about things?
Well, mostly books. I mean, okay, my mother was amazing. She supported my love. But it was books about Dr. Dolittle, who learned the language of animals. I wanted to learn the language of animals. But then the switch came when I was 10, and I read the book about Tarzan of the Apes. And of course, I fell passionately in love with this glorious Lord of the Jungle. And what did the wretched man do? He married the wrong Jane. Anyway, that was when I made my vow. Grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them.
What would you say to a parent that want to know how to maybe have this spark in the children, the spark about environment, about being kind to animals? What kind of experience are good experience for childs in the city to maybe be more aware of the nature that's around us?
That's easy. Join Roots and Shoots. I'm serious. It is, because I've had so many hundreds and hundreds of young people say, Roots and Shoots changed my life. And it's given them hope, and they get more and more hope. And as I say, they're going to be the next decision makers. Some of them already are. And they're going to be the next teachers. They're going to be the next parents.
So you can make the invitation to every parent in Chile.
Yes.
These problems are global. They can be a little overwhelming. How can any average person that is seeing us here in Chile, watching this, say, I want to make a difference? What can we do?
Okay, the problem is people get depressed because they look at the news, which is full of doom and gloom. And let's face it, we're going through pretty dark times. We are, I mean, politically, socially, and especially environmentally. And so I say to people, you can't solve all those problems. But what about in your own community? Is there something you care about? Maybe it's litter, maybe it's cruelty to animals. Maybe try and get together with some of your friends and do something. And then you'll see, yes, I can make a difference. And then if you think it's people like you making a difference all around the world, then you have some hope again.
You said that we are living dark times, also in politics, and many powerful politicians, even presidents, are denying climate crisis, are saying that we should stick to fossil fuels, for example. They are not really concerned about the loss of biodiversity. Does that concern to you that these powerful people have this kind of mentality?
And yes, it does, of course. And, you know, I don't believe that they believe there's no such thing as climate change. But they don't want to admit it because, well, there's a connection, isn't there, between politicians and big corporations and the military, for that matter. And so they're lobbied. And so, you know, the big businesses want to go on making money in the way they've always made money. So they don't want to believe in climate change. And they persuade the politicians to not to take measures against it.
How we as citizens can contrast that situation, can fight about it?
We have to elect the right people into politics and try and do what we can about business. But I think, the important thing is sometimes a politician does introduce something to help the planet, but it might mean it's going to cost a little bit more. And so people then turn against the politician. But if you think of food that's grown, sustainably, organically, and so on, it might cost a little bit more, but that means you will value it more. You will appreciate it more. And that's so important, because right now, some of the food is so cheap because it is destroying the environment. And so people just can buy masses of it, and then they waste half of it. And then the other half of the world is starving.
And we need to choose in some point between development and conserving and protecting the planet?
We have to, otherwise, again, what's going to happen to our children and theirs? If we don't take action now, it is true, we're moving, we've got a window of time, I think, but it is closing. And if we don't get together now and take action, governments, businesses, and us, it's up to us too.
Mm-hmm. And is there any hope in climate innovation, technology maybe, that can help us to save the planet?
Yes, don't ask me too much, because I'm not an expert in it. But what I do know is that some solutions give rise to other problems, and this makes it so difficult. Like moving towards, electronic cars. Well, that's digging up a lot of ground to get the lithium for the batteries. And there's so much like that you think, oh, this is wonderful. And then you find out, well, my goodness, it's harming the indigenous people there because their land is being taken away for mining of precious minerals.
And why are you today here? Tiny country far away at the edge of the world like Chile. What impact can we make in Chile about the global issues that we are talking today?
Well, I would say in Chile, first of all, concentrate on working with the problems facing Chile. Never mind the global ones to start with. Just think of the problems that you have here.
What do you think are the big problems here?
Well, I don't know. I haven't been in Chile much, but I know that there's loss of biodiversity. I know that there's problem with industrial agriculture. I know there's problem with poverty. I know there's problems depriving indigenous people of their land, and so on. Mm-hmm. And those are problems for you to tackle in Chile.
Mm-hmm. Over 6 decades ago, you started this journey in Tanzania. Now you're in Chile. You're now 91. You could be maybe resting in your home, enjoying life. What's the motivation that keeps you going and going, visiting countries, going in planes, talking with people?
Well, it may sound strange, but I think all of us have a mission in life. We're here for a reason. My mission is to give people hope so that they will take action. And if they don't take action, we're doomed. And I care. I care about, animals. I've got 3 grandchildren. I care about their children and their children.
You have many activities here, but you have also a chance to be with the children of Roots and Shoots. Yeah. Is this what you most enjoy in your trips?
Well, I enjoy it, but I enjoy also talking to groups of heads of corporations, CEOs, because I like a challenge, and I just became involved to something I really don't like, which is going to big music festivals. I don't like those noisy, But going to a big music festival is a chance to spread a message to people who wouldn't come to one of my lectures. So try and reach people in some way who otherwise you wouldn't reach.
And you think that's part of your mission too? Mrs. Goodall, thank you very much for this conversation with Chile.
Thank you.